Hello, everyone. My name is Anselmo, and my partner is Lacey. And the issue we have decided to present to you today is whether Christian athletes and coaches should participate in sports on the Sabbath. We identified this issue because around the world, probably most places apart from the Midwest, do not keep the Sabbath holy. And if Lacey or I were to get employed by a sporting club that participates in events or training sessions on Sundays, that would certainly become an issue for us to deal with. And before we go any further, although I believe most of you will know what the Sabbath is, I'll briefly explain what it means. According to the Oxford Dictionary, the Sabbath is a day of religious observance and abstinence from work kept by Jews from Friday evening to Saturday evening, and by most Christians on Sundays. We as Christians are called by the third commandment to remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. But what exactly does it mean to keep the Sabbath day holy? Why would it be okay to participate in sports on the Sabbath? Why would it not be? And these are the kinds of questions Lacey and I will attempt to answer throughout this presentation. And we will ultimately also give you our own opinions too by the end of it.
All right, so we're going to start giving reasons for participating on the Sabbath. And keeping the Sabbath is no longer an issue of covenant faithfulness and obedience, but an area of legitimate disagreement between Christians. So again, this is kind of restating our issue. And participating on the Sabbath is becoming very prominent, especially around the world and in America. But it is becoming an argument between Christians. So I first want to look at some pieces of scripture. So, observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. And that is Deuteronomy 5, verses 12 through 14. So what I want to highlight there, it says 6 days you shall labor, and the seventh day is a Sabbath. Nowhere in there does it say that Sunday is the Sabbath. It does not clarify which day. It just says to take one day and recognize it as the Sabbath. And then we look at Romans 14:5, and Paul tells us, one person considers one day more sacred than another considers every day alike. Each of them should be fully convinced in their own mind. So I think that right there is just telling us that people are going to think what they're going to think. They're going to have their own opinions, and how they choose to observe the Sabbath or how they choose to observe each day is their own opinion. So does it really matter what other people think? Then I want to talk about what is rest. So observing the Sabbath, a lot of people talk about resting and relaxing, taking a break. So the principle in the New Testament is that God ordains that 1 day in 7 be restful. I think that's a creation ordinance for our good and for our health. So again, it comes back to the topic of 1 day in 7 being restful. It never clarifies. And again, talking about how rest is good for our health. But people can have different meanings of rest. So another definition is an instance or period of relaxing or ceasing to engage in a strenuous or stressful activity. So ceasing to engage in a strenuous or stressful activity can be different activities for different people. So people have different forms of rest. If I am working an office job and sit behind a desk 5 days a week, perhaps my release, my escape is to go golfing or to go for a run or to go fishing. But if I am working manual labor, then maybe I want to sit on the couch and watch Netflix. So there's just different ways in which people can rest. And so I don't think, again, it comes back to the Romans verse that how I choose to rest is different than anyone else is going to choose to rest. And finally, another point is just saying that we are blessed by God with many talents and gifts. We took the spiritual gifts inventory. We wrote those papers about using our gifts to serve people and to serve the Lord. So I think if we're given these gifts and given these talents, that we should use them to serve the Lord every single day. And yeah, it's our way, or it's our decision in which we choose to use our gifts to serve the Lord. And 1 Peter 4:10 says, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. So again, just kind of reiterating what I just said, God gives us gifts, and there are many ways we can use them to serve the Lord, and we should use them.
Okay, so upon research of why we shouldn't participate in sport on the Sabbath, I was able to find lots of compelling arguments as to why we shouldn't. And first and foremost, I was able to find an article written by Dale Hudson on churchleaders.com, where he mentions that according to a research done by a research group called Barna, 63.5 million practicing Christians who say that they are committed to their faith attend church a minimum of once a month and state that their faith is very important to them. I've attached a link to this research on the references page if you would like to read through it. But Hudson goes on to provide guidance as to why church attendance is so low these days, and he states that parents need to resist the urge to involve their kids in sports that will take them away from church on Sundays. And this is because when they do this, they send a message to their kids that church is optional, and this confuses them to think that church is just somewhere you can go to when you're on holiday or you have nothing better to do. So all in all, we can see here that participation in sport on the Sabbath is actually a distraction to most people, or could be a distraction to most people that draw them away from keeping the Sabbath holy. And second of all, I was able to find a statement on an article on a website called unitedchurchofgod.org, which reads, the best way to keep the Sabbath holy is by refraining from works or pursuits that are intended for the other 6 days of the week. And on the third commandment, we are clearly told that the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord our God, and that we shall not do any works. But by participating in sports on Sundays, are we refraining from works or pursuits that are intended for the other 6 days of the week? Or are we participating in sports for our own selfish pursuits that we do on all other days of the week? This, I can't speak for anyone else, but I personally would not be able to put my hand on heart and say, I play sport on Sundays to glorify God. And moving on from that, if we read Isaiah 58, verses 13 to 14, near the start of the passage, you can see that it says, if you keep your feet from breaking the Sabbath and from doing as you please, then you will find your joy in the Lord. I think the key words in this passage is doing as you please. And although I personally think that there are a lot of different ways you can dissect this verse, if participating in sport is something that pleases you, then maybe it's something that is distracting you from giving all praise and focus to God on Sundays.
All right, now we're going to get into our own personal opinions and personal stances. And this is an issue that I have debated heavily, and it's weighed on my heart a little bit. I've definitely felt some guilt over it because, as you can see by my pictures, I participated in club volleyball, which there was a lot of participation on Sundays involved in that. If we weren't playing in a tournament on Sunday, we usually had practice on Sunday. And I agree with Anzi when he said he wouldn't be able to put his hand over his heart and say, I am participating in this to glorify the Lord. It brought me I did it for my own selfish pursuits and my selfish reasons. And with that, I also think it is important to instill that church is not optional. And I think I was in a little bit better place with that because I've grown up in a Christian home, and my parents are very grounded in their faith and grounded in the Lord. So I still understood the importance of observing the Sabbath and glorifying the Lord, and that church is not optional. But I think that's where the issue is coming for a lot of other people in the world is that they aren't as grounded in their faith as I am. So it does kind of send the message, and church kind of just puts on the back burner, and it doesn't become important anymore. But with that, I would definitely lean more on the side of being for participating on the Sabbath. For one, I'd probably be a hypocrite if I wasn't. And for the second, that Romans verse saying that what I consider my day to be is what I consider my day to be. And again, I have these talents, and God has given me these gifts, and I should use them, and I should enjoy them. And I would never want to take away my club experience. That middle picture there, the guy in the bright yellow shirt was a 3-time Olympian. He was the men's national team setter. And the girl in the front there, the shorter one, has his gold medal from Beijing on there. So just lots of cool experiences and opportunities that are given from the Lord that came through club. My relationships, I still talk to these girls every day. So yeah, I just think if we can find a way to balance the two and just understanding and finding another day of the week to observe the Lord and just, spending time in devotion, spending time in prayer, spending time with the Lord in his presence. In club volleyball tournaments, often you have different age groups. So different age groups play at different periods of the time. So typically the 16th group, they don't start playing till like 2:00. So you can get up and go to church on Sunday morning. You can do a Bible study with your team, all that kind of stuff. So I would definitely, side on the for argument. And now, Anzi, if you'd like to share yours.
Yeah, so I personally was able to, excuse me, I was personally able to resonate with John Piper's point of one day of the 7 being restful. And we can't put everyone into one category and say, this is how everyone needs to rest their bodies. Like, that's just not fair, And if someone sits in an office for their work 6 days a week, you can't criticize this person for wanting to get some exercise in on the 7th day, because that truly is this person's way of resting and keeping their body in shape, which, mind you, by all means can be done to glorify God, since there is the Bible verse where your body is a temple that represents God. And I mean, I also like Lacey put a lot of thought into this on what my personal opinion is on the issue. And we could nitpick all day about the ifs and buts and the little details about this issue, but I think it ultimately boils down to the fact that none of us have the right to judge another person's way of resting their body and glorifying God on the Sabbath. I mean, that's it. Only God can judge whether what we are doing on the Sabbath is holy or not. So I agree with Paul in the Bible when he says that one person may consider one day more sacred than the other, and another person may say every day is just as sacred as each other. But regardless of what your opinion is, you need to be fully convinced and confident in your own mind about your opinion, and you need to bring that opinion before God and get it approved.
All right, and so here's our reference list, and we just want to thank you for taking the time to listen to us today. We gave some pros and some cons, some pros being that Romans verse saying that what we consider to be sacred and what we consider to be holy and resting is our own decision, and we also are called to use our gifts and our talents. For the cons and the against the argument, church is becoming optional, unfortunately, and it isn't, and church attendance is declining. And how many of us can truthfully say that we are participating in things to find joy in the Lord instead of just joy in ourselves? So those are kind of our arguments wrapped up. I hope we've given you some good information, some good sources to help you maybe decide upon this issue in the future. Thank you.